Here on When Darkness Falls, we save the best for last. On Halloween night, sometimes the wind whispers through the bare branches and shadows stretch long across empty streets. Jack-o'-lanterns flicker like watchful eyes, their carved faces grinning as if they know secrets best left untold. But not every Halloween tale is about costumes and candy. Some stories are darker, stories of things that should have stayed buried. Instead, they moved, a corpse carried from place to place, its journey leaving behind whispers, unease, and a trail of fear. This isn't the kind of ghost story you tell around the campfire. This is a story rooted in reality, chilling not because it couldn't happen, but because it did. On nights like these, when the shadows stretch long and the air feels heavy, legends creep into stories, like ghosts refusing to rest. Some tales belong to the living, but others, stranger still, belong to the dead. Tonight, we're going to be unraveling one of the most unsettling true stories in America's history. The journey of a failed outlaw whose body would travel in death farther than he ever did in life. This is an eerie, haunting, true story. Of Elmer McCurdy, the bandit who wouldn't give up, even in death. So, Elmer J. McCurdy was born on January 1st, 1880, in this little town called Washington, Maine. And honestly, from the very start, his life was complicated. His mom, Sadie, was just 17 and unmarried. And back then, that was a huge no-no. People carried a lot of judgment around that. To avoid this shame, Sadie decided to pass Elmer off to her brother, George, and his wife, basically raising him as their child. For years, Elmer grew up thinking his mom was actually his older sister. For years, Elmer actually believed his mom just was an older sister to him, and that his aunt and uncle were just his real parents. But can you imagine finding out the truth later? When it did finally come out, it hit him hard. And honestly, he never really bounced back from that kind of betrayal. If you looked at it today, psychologists might say that this was a foundation for trauma, a crack in how he saw himself. But back then, it just came out as restlessness and anger. He did try to get back on track, trained as a plumber, and he actually was pretty good with tools and machinery. But steady work just never seemed to stick, especially with the way things were changing at the turn of the century. Then, in 1899, things got even worse. His mom and his grandfather had both passed away, and that loss just sent him into a downward spiral. After that, Elmer really started drifting, drinking too much, getting into fights, carrying around his heavy bitterness that seemed to shape every choice he made. By 1907, he tried to give himself some direction and enlisted in the U.S. Army. He ended up stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where he spent about 3 years. His focus? Machine guns and explosives. There, the first introduced nitroglycerin. This incredibly powerful, super unstable chemical they used in demolishing. The thing was, Elmer wasn't exactly an expert, but he thought he was. And that false confidence, that's going to play a huge role in the mess that became his criminal career. When his enlistment ended in 1910, Elmer stepped back into civilian life with no steady trade, no family, and really no purpose, except crime, that is. But here's the thing. By the early 1900s, the Wild West wasn't what it used to be. Trains still roared across the plains and banks still held the big fortunes, but lawmen now had cars, telegraphs, and faster weapons. Outlaws like McCurdy, they were already living out of the step of times. But still, Elmer was dead set on making a name for himself. First attempt, the train safe. In March of 1911, he and a couple of his buddies tried to rob a train near Oklahoma. Elmer broke out the nitrogen, thinking he could blow up the safe. And well, he blew it all right. The explosion was so strong, it basically melted a lot of the silver inside. Instead of the fortune, they walked away with scraps. The second attempt, the bank job. Later, the same year, he tried it again. This time, hitting a bank in Kansas. Same playbook, the nitrogen, same result, disaster. He wrecked the inside of the bank, but the vault, totally intact. They left empty-handed. Truly, guys, I cannot make this up. Okay, then we have the final attempt, the big train heist. By October, he thought he had a score of a lifetime. Word was it that Katy Train was hauling $400,000 in Army payroll. This kind of money was life-changing. He and his crew of misfits stopped the train near Oklahoma, but it was the wrong one. Instead of cash, they found $46 in coins, a jug of whiskey, and a few random personal items. That was it, the last straw. Now, newspapers had a field day with him. Instead of this fearsome outlaw he wanted to be, Elmer was now being laughed at as a bungling bandit. And to make matters worse, the law was right on his heels. On October 7th, 1911, deputies finally tracked him down at a ranch near Oklahoma. Elmer climbed up into the loft with his little stash and the jug of whiskey, couldn't forget that, determined to make a last stand. The posse surrounded the barn. Shots rang out, and for almost an hour, he yelled that he'd never be taken alive. When the gunfire finally stopped, it was over. Elmer was found lying in the straw, rifle still in his side. He was only 31. He entered a career as an outlaw, and honestly, kind of unimpressive. But here's the crazy part. That's not where the story ends. In fact, death was just the beginning of what made Elmer famous. Since no one came, no family had claimed him, his body was taken to Johnson Funeral Home. The undertaker, Joseph Johnson, used a strong embalming solution, the kind meant to keep bodies preserved for years. And because nobody showed up to collect Elmer, his second life, the one that would make him a legend, was about to begin. Days went by, weeks, months. Nobody came for Elmer. So Johnson made a choice. For a nickel, visitors could view the bandit who wouldn't give up. Children and curious locals dropped coins in a box, lifted sheet to see the outlaw who had gone down in a blaze of gunfire. Elmer became a macabre attraction, and word spread like fire. By 1916, two men appeared claiming to be his long-lost brothers. The truth? They were carnival promoters. They took Elmer's body, and his second life began. Back in the early 1900s, sideshows were huge. Traveling carnivals and circuses were everywhere, promising thrills and odyssey, sword swallowers, tattooed ladies, and preserved curiosity in a glass cases. People lined up and paid good money just to watch and gawk. And Elmer, weirdly enough, he fit right in. Billed as a real outlaw, his body drew crowds all across the Midwest and way beyond. By 1920s, he was on display in these so-called museums of crime, propped up alongside wax figures of Jesse James and Billy the Kid. Then, by the 1930s, he was hauled around with carnivals, passed from place to place like a sideshow prop. By the 1940s and 50s, things got murky. Some folks thought he was a wax dummy. Others swore he was just some kind of mummified trick. But the truth was, he was just kept getting passed around, a body without a real home. Then, by 1960s, time had taken its toll. He'd lost his finger, toes, even his ears. His face kept shrinking and skeletal. To keep him presentable, they covered him with wax and later slapped on this garish red paint. Eventually, he ended up in Long Beach, California, hanging inside a funhouse ride called Laugh in the Dark. There he dangled under neon lights, scaring visitors who had no idea they were screaming at an actual corpse. Fast forward to December 1976. A TV crew showed up at Long Beach Pike Amusement Park to film an episode of The $6 Million Man. While setting up shots inside the funhouse, one crew member grabbed a bright red mannequin hanging in the shadows, and when the arm snapped off, they realized it wasn't wood, it was plaster, and it was bone. So the police show up, and forensic experts take a look. Right away, they see signs of embalming, plus a bullet still lodged in his chest. And here the real bizarre part. They even found old carnival tickets stuffed in his mouth, like some makeshift way of preserving him. At this point, there was no denying it. That mannequin wasn't a prop at all. It was Elmer McCurdy, dead since 1911. After 65 years of being dragged from carnival to carnival, place to place, passed around, painted, and forgotten, the outlaw finally had a name again. News spread fast. Reporters dug into the strange journey. Historians pieced together how his body had been exploited for decades, and public couldn't decide if they were actually fascinated or horrified. In 1977, Elmer was finally laid to rest in Oklahoma, in the Boot Hill section of Summit View Cemetery, right alongside other outlaws of the Wild West. And to make sure no one ever dug him up or tried to profit from him again, officials poured 2 feet concrete over his grave. After 66 years of sideshows, neon lights, Bandit, who wouldn't give up, finally has peace. Elmer's story is wild, mixed of failure, tragedy, exploitation. In life, he was a small-town outlaw, not particularly good at crime, and clumsy with dynamite, but in death he turned into something much darker, a spectacle. It's very shameful. For decades people paid to gawk at his body, forgetting that he was once a real man with family, a history, and a name. And maybe that's part that might stick to you. And remember, when death becomes entertainment, humanity is the first thing that disappear. So nights like this, when carnival lights flicker in the distance and the sound of a train whistle drifts through the air, you can almost imagine Elmer still wandering the Midway, searching for the peace he was denied for so long. Thank you so much for watching and diving into another gripping case that might not be Halloween, but still kind of creepy, don't you think? If you like to see more cases covered with care and respect, don't forget to subscribe. Until then, keep your lights low, your pumpkins glowing, and please lock your doors. Bye for now.